Oh, shoot. Hang on. Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Arden, and today we are talking about DCeased, but this is all wrong. I gotta fix this. I go about that like that and that. Yep, and then let's just do this. Yep. There we go. Hey guys, that looks better. Yeah, you just ignore my phone going off over there. Uh, so today we're talking about the final three issues of DCeased, number 5, 6, and 7. I had a bit of a couple of things to do right before we started, and then totally forgot about the fact that I was all oriented different. But yeah, thanks for joining me. The biggest of thanks to Henry Brown because before we even started streaming, he donated $5 and says it'll be nice to get more video games and motion graphic comics of this series, and maybe even have as a sort of the score of the soundtrack Wu-Tang Clan forever. So I'll have to keep that in mind, especially with such a generous little gesture there. Let's put it that way. Of course, if we were to do something like that, maybe we should just start at the original DCeased, which I think is what he was kind of saying there. And I said, "Oh, thank you so much. Like, just in chat, we haven't even started yet." And he's like, "I know, I just had to support before I forget." So I really appreciate that. That was totally awesome of you, dude. But beyond that, we are going to be here just talking about my initial review of the series. And I guess that is a correct sentence because I'll be talking about the series as a whole, but in particular these final three issues. And as far as I'm concerned, like, these are the reviews. So if we do a recap of Dead Planet, I don't really feel the need to repeat myself and do a review again necessarily, unless there's kind of retroactive things I want to say, which is unlikely. So I've always kind of viewed these live streams as like a sort of a replacement for some of the review videos for comics, especially the ones as they're coming out. But Dead Planet's been wrapped for a little bit now. I just have kind of been sitting on it. And now we're going to talk about these final issues. For those that don't know, DCeased is this ongoing meta-narrative by Tom Taylor as part of an alternate world in the universe of DC, or like multiverse or omniverse of DC as it's called now, where the entire planet has been taken over by these zombies or beings that resemble zombies who have been consumed by this sort of biological version of the anti-life equation, this new gods concept that just sort of spreads around Earth and basically infects a lot of major characters, to the extent that most like big names in the world of DC are long dead. We now have like a Justice League composed of characters such as John Kent, son of Superman, who's all grown up and has kind of become Superman himself. Damian Wayne, son of Batman, who's become Batman as he's grown up as well. Wonder Girl has gone on to become Wonder Woman in a similar vein. And Black Canary kind of is the new Green Lantern of this sector, basically, after both Hal Jordan was killed and her husband was infected by the anti-life equation, which kind of happened over the course of this particular series. So far it's been a lot of fun. It's really been a lot of this ambitious alternate universe storytelling, and I would still say, broadly speaking, DC's is more or less like that. However, I do have to say these final three issues I'm definitely a lot cooler on and much less excited about than the first four issues, for various reasons. The biggest being it just doesn't really follow through on, or doesn't really feel like a complete end to this particular mini series. We don't really wrap up every little plot thread of DC, so it's just kind of some of the storylines introduced here get resolved, and then I guess other stuff will be resolved later. And for whatever reason, I just didn't get left feeling like particularly excited about it, or with that sense of catharsis that you might get out of a like nice story with a beginning, middle, and end. So in a lot of ways, I definitely found these issues weaker. If you have been reading all the Dead Planet issues like I have, it's definitely probably worth finishing up. But to be honest, I found it pretty disappointing overall. There's a lot of stuff going on here but broadly speaking, most of it really focuses on the big battle against the supervillains and their army of Amazos. Issue number 5 is kind of set up with that, and I have all the credits kind of written out in the titles, so we don't need to get into it too much. But Tom Taylor continues his work with people like Hairsine and Baldiassini, who do the artwork, and it's relatively strong. I like Beredo's coloring as well, but overall, the writing and stuff just doesn't quite leave me as excited as I was. Uh, we get an interesting death with Red Hood and a really awesome moment where Cassandra Cain gets to use some Shazam powers, which is cool as hell. And there's even a neat little encounter with the Spectre right at the end of issue 5, but it's relatively simple. Raphael and Tevia, thanks for joining me for this stream. Tevia is saying, I love DC's Dead Planet. It's really awesome and badass. You know, I was feeling that way up until a certain point, but yeah, like I said, I was definitely a little cooler, and I definitely thought the big epic ending that the books were kind of hinting and building towards didn't really pay off to me personally. Tevia says, Cassandra Cain becoming Captain Marvel makes me so happy. That was a cool moment with her in the lightning bolt, and it talks about how a person would need to be of pure spirit, and it's kind of this like character development moment for her. Tom Taylor's definitely good at those kind of character moments, and that was strong. And I do feel like issue number 5 kind of left me going into it pretty excited about things. Tevia says he's also excited to see Superboy or Superman fighting Trigon. Well, that kind of gets into issue number 6, but also where I started to get a little disappointed. Because we do have a really cool moment where to make the cure, actually I really love this moment, all the greatest living minds, including like Damian Wayne, Detective Chimp, but even Wally West, because his mind moves so quickly, they all sort of join together through the green to sort of fashion a cure. Really beautiful and subdued moment, kind of underlay that they actually did manage to successfully create it. And as a group of them go out to try and cure their first target, which everyone agrees to be Big Barda, just because it was part of the deal Mr. Miracle made for his return. Even though there is some debate, they do kind of agree to just let it go. And mostly because Scott Free is pretty honest with Black Canary. He's like, Barda is a new god, and she's tough and can handle something going wrong with this cure. We shouldn't really risk Oliver on this. If something goes wrong and he dies, she's more likely to survive. So they do that, and it's actually cured. And again, like, this is a pretty solid moment. And meanwhile, the Amazo virus, or sorry, not the Amazo virus, the Amazo androids just start attacking and just destroying every unliving being right as they discover that there's a cure. Now, so far, everything here is rock solid, actually. I really like all the artwork and the build-up. Trigon emerges from the earth, and I was thinking, wow, what are we gonna do in this final issue? How are they gonna pull it off? And then we find Constantine assembling like Dr. Fate's helmet and all these other mystical things, and pulling them together into becoming one like super powered being. And he's like, I'm gonna save the world. So that's kind of the end of issue number 6. Actually I read that in. Shadowcatcher says 7 minutes late, but here. Well, happy for you to join us. For those that don't know, Shadowcatcher lives in a pretty wild time zone relative to when I stream, so it's always impressive when he is able to show up. Raphael says, a Wonder Girl looks like Captain Marvel in the comic cover. There's Wonder Girl and Mary Marvel in this story. But yeah, that I like. Tom Taylor doesn't really shy away from having a lot of badass ladies in this story, and that's pretty great too. So then the final issue begins with all this stuff going on. People are battling Amazo robots. Trigon's there, and the mages are kind of getting ready for Constantine to show up, and people are battling away. But well, that's pretty much it. There's a bunch of stuff. Everyone runs around trying to cure people while they're also trying to shut down the Amazo bots at the same time. Constantine comes up to Trigon. They exchange some words. He punches him in the face. It's a whole thing. John gets horribly bloodied, and I don't really. I guess he just gets killed. I don't really remember how that all ends. Um, I don't remember how any of this ends actually, so I'm just gonna flip through it. Constantine does kind of. Oh yeah, so he possesses Trigon by like becoming Dead Man, I believe, because he absorbed Dead Man's soul into Ragman's rags. The whole thing. But he possesses Trigon, shrinks himself down, and stabs gets the demon to stab himself and essentially destroy himself. While they run around curing everybody and somehow shut down the Amazobots and all of that. And I kind of am glossing over the ending because I kind of just flipped through it when I first read this and was like, oh, that's it? What about all that stuff with like Darkseid coming back? And the answer is kind of like, oh, well, I guess that's going to be dealt with in a future series, but also we cured the world. And there's like a little nice page at the end recognizing that moment. And that's where I kind of get, I feel like something's missing in all of this. And I guess as a reviewer, it's up to me to kind of help define that. But I really do feel like there should be more of a sense of closure to it, or I feel as though Tom Taylor maybe underplayed the cure moments. It was such a struggle to get to this point. This is one of the few zombie fictions ever where they actually managed to not only harness and fashion a cure, but deploy it to the entire population and essentially save the world. So it's weird to me that there's all these plot threads still in the air, and I am a little iffed about that, we'll say. I do think it kind of felt a little thrown together as an ending, and there is just, it's leaving us for more. And I'm not necessarily against more of DCeased, but you compare it to. I just felt like the series was a little stronger than that. You look at something like Unkillables, and it ended a little more strongly, even if it didn't have some big ending, because it had a sense of closure to it. Um, I was thinking also of what Shadowcatcher just said in chat. Plot holes where Superman left in the sun and Darkseid returning. That's the other big one in the air. So this infection is still out there, but they can cure it now. So I'm very curious where it goes from here. It's kind of cool that these things are up in the air, but personally I did feel a little underwhelmed, especially by the final issue. And I was looking at least one other review of it as well, and I got very similar sentiments out of it. So like I said, so I feel I have very mixed feelings about these final issues, and I'm not 100% in love with it. Uh, so Isaac Warren says, "Is this like zombies?" And then Raphael answers him saying, "Anti-life zombies." Yeah, I would agree. They're kind of like unliving zombies, but they aren't full-fledged zombies, which is how they were able to cure everyone. And there are some nice moments in the cure. I just wish it lasted a little more than like a couple of pages. Tevia says, plus, unlike Marvel zombies, which got stupid, we actually get a cure to the virus, which makes me so happy. He wrote this before I said all that. And this new trinity with John, Mary, Marvel, Black Canary, Damian Wayne, saving their loved ones. I guess I did just say all of that, but I do agree. And there's a really nice moment where, like John Superboy, or Superman now, I guess, gets to save his grandfather, and he just says, "My, how you've grown." So I don't hate it all, and there are some really strong elements to it. I just wish I got. It reminds me actually a lot of the original DC story, where I just felt it was missing a few key ingredients to make me really like drift towards it and have like a complete sense of a reading experience enough that I can strongly recommend it, kind of thing. Unfortunately, DC's kind of keeps missing that mark, at least compared to something like Injustice, Tom Taylor's other big alternate universe story. And while I don't hate this stuff, I do feel like there are issues at play here. Um, New York. Okay, yeah. So we kind of went over that. Raphael says when Superman comes out of the sun, Superman's like 1 million zombies. Well, he's also been like absorbing that power this whole time. So it'll be very interesting. There's also like a colonized other world out there now of humans. So a lot of things can happen going forward. uh, Tevye says, "What about DCeased Hope at World's End?" Well, um, that is kind of more of a prequel series and is digital first, so I'm not really fully caught up on that, but we can also take a look on that, and that kind of gets into what Henry Brown was saying earlier. Also, I totally spaced on that. Henry Brown donated another $2. Thank you, sir. And says, doesn't Amazo take people's weaknesses on too? I think so, but to be honest, the cool part of Amazo, taking on other heroes' strengths and stuff, is completely glossed over here. We have like an army of androids that are as powerful as Superman, kind of thing in theory, and they just sort of get like brushed aside in this final issue and aren't really that big of a plot point even after being built up a lot. And that really gets into my frustration, especially with issue number 7. Heavy also asked, is New Genesis still destroyed? Yeah, all that stuff still happened with Darkseid, and it's interesting they didn't even really tease it at the end here. I thought that was very strange. Raphael says they can cure that anti-life zombies, but they still have cancer on Earth. And then he does a little confused face. Well, I mean, cancer wasn't really much of a concern on that planet at the moment, to be fair. And the cure was this huge struggle where they had to do this mind meld through the green thing. And I thought the development of the cure was actually one of the most interesting aspects of this series and was actually handled well. If they made a bigger deal out of that and they actually subdued a lot of the action, I'd probably be a lot more supportive of this series. Jordan Davis asks, how would you rate DC? Well, so we don't typically do scoring beyond just insular grading things. I could give you a sense of how it graded against, say, the rest of DCeased, in which case I would say a little bit above average, or maybe average, to be honest, now that I'm thinking about it, with Unkillables and Hope at World's End kind of currently ranked above it in my eyes, but this being above the original DC series. But that's kind of subjective. Beyond that, I think it kind of gets into a bit of a skewed comparison, but I will say, for example, I like it better than the average Marvel Zombies series. So it's all relative, certainly, but I didn't hate it. Like, it wasn't bad either. I feel like I've invited scoring now that I talked about it in grading the Avengers and stuff, so I'll get around to that in a second, but I will say I don't think I'd recommend DC's Dead Planet. There's other cooler alternate universe DC stuff, including, aside from like a lot of the Black Label content out these days, Injustice, the whole run by Tom Taylor, I would say is far better. And if you haven't gone through those books, I would definitely check that out before DC. So I don't really think I'd recommend it, which is a much more typical scoring. Now, if you wanted me to give you a sense of a grade in terms of grading the Avengers, just remember that this is just comparing it to the Avengers book, and this is a very different sort of thing. But I'd still probably rank it around like a B minus or something like that off the top of my head, because while it has strong art and some very cool ideas, it doesn't really come together as a final product. But let's not get too much in a habit of grading everything, especially because that only is a grade relative to other Avengers books, so I don't really think it's a meaningful grade. But you asked, so I gave an answer. York Lane says, well, at least this DC's didn't spend 4 issues of the characters just standing around on a rooftop. Fair? Oh goodness. Yeah, I didn't hate. I know I didn't hate like some of the other series, and Unkillables is kind of interesting. But you are kind of right, and that's maybe a better way of putting it. To be honest, I don't love any one DC series. I think if there's any that is strong enough, it's Hope at World's End, just because those books are relatively standalone, and there's some real gems in there. I really don't think it comes together as this interesting little product like Injustice does, and even Injustice kind of has diminishing returns after a while. It's kind of a shame. I really like Tom Taylor as a writer. I just haven't really drifted towards this series. And if anything, it kind of reminds me of Marvel Zombies in terms of quality, where it's like, well, DCeased is consistently better than Marvel Zombies, but it's the same kind of thing where it's like, yeah, they're okay, but I don't really care about zombies that much. I don't think anyone really does anymore. Even the biggest zombie fan isn't like, oh yeah, I'm without zombie content these days. It's that you're flush with it, uh, even if you're a fan. And I think if you had a fan of zombie content, and they were to look at these books, they'd probably be like, it's pretty mediocre to be honest, and I'd be right there with them. And in terms of alternate universe like Marvel or DC content, this zombie stuff is never top tier in my opinion. But yes, to be clear, I do find I like DCeased in general better than Marvel Zombies. Tom Taylor has kind of fashioned his own little world and kept enough characters alive that he's created his own little niche thing. I will tell you, like, I do have a problem with the stories and stuff, but the characters, I love this Justice League. It's such a cool Justice League with, like, Black Canary, Cassandra Cain, John Kent, and Damian Wayne kind of heading it up as the main characters, and then all these other little figures involved. That stuff's great. And honestly, I think one of Dead Planet's bigger problems is that they're not a big enough part of the story. Constantine takes way too much of the focus away. I think Tom Taylor just has a real love for that character, but not. I don't love how he writes him. Let's put it that way. He's fine, but it's not like, oh, I love my Tom Taylor's take on Constantine. It's just kind of this passable CW level of writing for the character, I'd say. uh, Tevye says John Kent saving his grandpa makes me so happy. Unlike Bendis' horrible mistreatment of the character. Yeah, I definitely like. I think he was just saying that in response to what I was saying earlier, but I agree. York says I get other stuff was happening, but come on. The thing about that is like, oh well, I liked Unkillables, but I also don't have a good answer to your criticism because it's like, well, yeah. And I feel like I always blank on another series from DC's, but they're all like this kind of same, like, yeah, that they're fun, but not fun. Tevye says, plus they didn't know there was a cure in the past until that distress signal was sent. Oh yeah, you can't fault anyone for that, but the villains definitely just kind of are like, whatever, we're gonna do things our way and refuse to listen. There is a good moment where Penguin's own guards kind of turn against him and stuff, and that was awesome. I do like that. I forgot about that until just now, so that's something. There's a lot of moments, but this is a real the whole is not the sum of its parts moment or situation. I like individual aspects of this book, like the artwork, these characters, and key little plot elements to it, but it doesn't really come together. I truly feel the Trigon stuff was not resolved well, or the Amazo stuff. And that's kind of the crux of your plot. And then the dark side stuff wasn't brought up at all in any of these books ever again. So it's clearly like a future thing, but it's like, oh, you have to at least tease it or something, I feel. So that's all very disappointing out of Tom Taylor, to be honest. The artist did a great job, but he should know to do these things as a writer. That's where I'm like, what the hell happened? And that's also on the editor, too, for not saying, like, hey, what happened to Darkseid? Like, why aren't we talking about that here, kind of thing? It needs to be acknowledged in this series, even if it gets dealt with elsewhere. So, lots of little issues here and there. All we needed at the end of like number 7 was just a little teaser or a taste of like, oh, maybe there's something else happening in the future, I think. And it would have made a difference. But it ends on a happy moment, which is cool. You just need an extra page after that, I think, to kind of just, there's more out there, just to let people know kind of thing, or something. I think without it, or maybe that they were planning on doing something more and then canceled it, which is even worse, because then the dark side stuff is just, we forgot. That's the only way we can treat it from now on, and that's way worse. Raphael says, this is definitely getting a sequel with maybe Superman being a problem. I would imagine so, because DC seems to sell pretty well. I just, like I said, I think it's a real weakness that there wasn't something to acknowledge that, because as it stands, it's just a plot hole because like we all assume this will be followed up on in the future, but if you're taking Dead Planet as its own distinct unit, there isn't really much there, and that's actually kind of my exact problem with DCeased. It opens the gate for all these interesting character stuff, but on its own, it's just kind of a standard superhero zombie story, which at this point we have seen a lot of, unfortunately. uh, like it's been overdone, I feel. Um, and I just want to explain why I'm a little cool on these books compared to the first four, which I quite liked. Now, Tevye says, speaking of Marvel Zombies, that reminds me, any opinion on Marvel Zombies Resurrection? Well, we reviewed a couple of books, but to be honest, I kind of lost interest and didn't even pick up the last stuff, and I don't particularly feel the need to, like, go and hunt it. And I did kind of think about it over the course of this review, and I was still like, I'm still not that motivated because it kind of fell back on old habits with Marvel Zombies, where it's just like these okay stories that never really feel as though they go anywhere, even after their big reboot of the Marvel Zombies continuity. So, yeah. Thunder God Sid says, I thought DC's was pretty good junk food. You know, that's a pretty insightful comment. I would say that's a pretty good description of it. So no one should feel bad about liking these books or enjoying them. I kind of find them and a lot of Tom Taylor's style of writing with these books kind of just like, oh yeah, they're not like the deepest thing in the world, but God, do I love reading them sometimes. And even these Dead Planet books, like these ones that I didn't like as much, are quick and easy reads, and not in a negative way. I get through them really quickly. I'm having fun with the characters. I'm enjoying the moments. And even in a book that I didn't really like that much, it wasn't a difficult read to get through. Tom Taylor is still a solid writer and one of my favorite in DC's like roster of regulars, whatever you want to call them. He's a very reliable writer, I find, even in the context of this review, and I generally look forward to a Tom Taylor book for that reason. So let's not go too far with like my criticism of him. But this was disappointing, kind of for that reason. Tevye says Unkillables I thought was fun. Yeah, like that just gets into what York was saying, and I don't fault you for not liking Unkillables, York Lane. Raphael was saying Marvel Zombies versus DC Zombies. Who would you bet on? I would say Marvel Zombies because they retain more of their intelligence, therefore can make better use of their powers and stuff. Marvel Zombies and the zombies themselves have been able to accomplish over the years is rather frightening. And even though the anti-life zombies of DCeased are quite thinking and are able to plan and be quite aggressive compared to the average zombie, they don't really hold a candle to the power of Marvel zombies. And the Although to be fair, part of that might be because the characters of DC were able to better respond to this sort of thing and basically prevented any of the speedsters from getting infected, because that's what kind of did the world of Marvel Zombies in like the flack of a finger. Because Quicksilver got infected and just infested the entire world in mere seconds. So, I think avoiding that was a solid decision on the part of Tom Taylor. But if that happened, well, there's certainly a competition there. But I do think I would side with Marvel Zombies because they like accessed the power cosmic. They were able to cross universes multiple times. They were able to like not only effectively use their powers but do the Quicksilver thing. All these little details over the years of stuff that they kind of are able to do that I never really saw any of the anti-life zombies do. So, you know, that's my opinion. Tevye says, Injustice Years 4 and 5 were bad. I don't know if I go so far as to say bad, but certainly inferior to years 1 through 3. But he says, but to be fair, Tom Taylor didn't write those years. You know what? I think I forgot that. So that does explain a lot, and that really does recontextualize Tom Taylor as a writer to a huge degree. Tevye says, Marvel Zombies is just a complete mess that lost its plot when it crossed over with Marvel Apes. I mean, if that's where you think it lost its quality, well, I personally Disagree. I never really got into Marvel Zombies even from the start. Um, Tevye says, I love seeing the Super Sons, John Kent and Jamie and Wayne, take up their father's mantles, and seeing John team up with Barry Marvel makes me so happy. Well, that's kind of the thing. And that's what I was getting at. Like, you could really use this Justice League roster, even outside of the context of DC's, in a really fun way. In so many ways. I really just like the team itself. And if they were to star in their own series just on a regular Earth, fighting whatever superhero threats, they're interesting enough characters, kind of different enough from the original Justice League or any iteration of it, that I love it. I really like it too, and it fills me with this certain joy, even in the face of a pretty dark series. But Dead Planet kind of has never felt miserable, and that's one thing I like about DC's, is it doesn't wallow in its misery too much, and there is enough kind of balance out like this apocalyptic world with like some lightness and fun along the way. And York Lane, I didn't have an issue responding or understanding you there, but some stuff does get lost with slow mode, I should say. But that way people can't spam chat. Not that I was saying you were. Raphael says we need a Bizarro zombie Superman arc. That would be cool. And those kind of arcs is where I was getting at. Like, yeah, if you wanted to do DC's Justice League and it's just about them like protecting the colonized world and Earth and getting them to kind of survive and facing super villains or alien threats or whatever, I wouldn't be against that. Like I said, it's a cool team. Uh, Tevye says Marvel Zombies did do a crossover to the main universe, kind of, sort of, in Black Panther and Secret Wars 2015, and that's about it. Well, they were also introduced as a crossover to the Ultimate Universe, which is what I was thinking about, because that is one Marvel Zombie story I kind of liked. This is the very first one. I wasn't even really thinking of that, but when like zombie Reed Richards lures Ultimate Reed Richards, who later goes on to become the Maker, into this world, and he's like, yeah, like, oh, we will help you out, kind of thing, and then they turn out to be zombies, and they have that whole adventure with Magneto. That was pretty solid. After that, I kind of feel like no, it was all good. You have nothing to apologize for, York. I was just saying, oh, I had no issue understanding you along the way, and I was just kind of explaining we've been using slow mode now, and I think it just sort of not that we've had much issue with spam. It was just a feature YouTube had that I was like, okay, yeah, we might as well have that on. It makes sense. Raphael says, can Necron control zombies? Traditional zombies, I would say generally, yes. He has control over the Black Lantern Corps, and those are undead beings, and a regular zombie, I would say Necron would probably have some command over. However, I would say the anti-life equation is not a version of death, strictly speaking. It is what it is, like anti-life. So those characters who have been infected with it are not technically dead, and I would say Necron very explicitly wouldn't have power over those beings, which is an interesting thought. Tevye says, I am happy there's hope for this zombie universe. I said that earlier in the review, and I agree. It threw me off a little bit, and maybe that's why I was a little surprised, but it is touching when there is this sense of hope at the end. Like I said, it's just, I don't necessarily, while the cure was earned, the dismissal of the Amazo threat and the stuff with Trigon really wasn't. Raphael says, can Necron become a zombie? I would say no, he's already like a being of death, but he could probably be infected with the anti-life equation, which gets into my earlier thought there. Tevye says that he really didn't like the Ultimate Fantastic Four story, which started Marvel Zombies as well, but then he says it went downhill real fast. Yeah, I like, because they also had like that crossover with Evil Dead, which I found really disappointing too, and I like Evil Dead, so yeah. I don't think that really went there. But there we go. So that's a nice little review of DCeased, various other series, and Marvel Zombies and how it compares. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I do want to thank everyone who I've been talking to in chat, but especially Henry Brown for donating $7 across the stream, basically. If I'm saying the wrong amounts, I apologize. I am going by the amounts YouTube tells me, and those are probably relevant to Canadian dollars. But whatever it is, I appreciate it just the same. Tevia says, speaking of DC, that reminds me, any opinion on Infinite Frontier? Well, I might have picked that up this week, and you can expect a review on that stuff in the future. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time here on Comic Island. And yes, I agree with you, Raphael. This was fun.